After Zephyr got disfigured while saving his first love. I cried my heart out in the hospital. I kept asking the doctor if they could cure his face. Everyone thought I was infatuated with love and loved him desperately. Only Zephyr's younger brother handed me a tissue and smiled. Sister-in-law. My brother's face can't be cured. Why don't you choose me? My face now looks more like Phoenix than my brother's. Zephyr had been in the hospital for 3 days. And his first love hadn't come to visit him. Only I changed his dressing and brought him meals without missing a day. The car crashed into us too quickly. Zephyr instinctively rushed forward to protect Aurora. Under his protection, Aurora only suffered some minor injuries. And I, huddled in the back seat, was lucky enough to avoid the impact and only scraped my arm. It was only Zephyr. When he rushed forward, his face was cut by the flying glass. The shard slashed fiercely from between his eyebrows to the corner of his mouth, almost disfiguring him. The doctor said that even if such an injury healed, it would leave a scar. Only I didn't believe it. I went around to various hospitals, and even sought out a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, but the final replies were all the same. Unless he had plastic surgery, the scar couldn't be removed. I cried my heart out in the hospital, drawing everyone's attention. Zephyr couldn't hold back either. When I was changing his dressing, he asked me, "Sylvia, do you love me so much? If your face is disfigured, I don't want to live either." I sobbed as I cried, and my eyes looking at his face were full of pity and sadness. "Stop crying. You look so ugly when you cry." Zephyr wanted to wipe my tears but didn't in the end. He sneered ironically. "I can't believe it. The campus belle at Peking University is also a love-struck fool." Between Zephyr and me, it was Zephyr who pursued me first. I was indifferent to him and didn't have a good attitude, but I couldn't stop his enthusiasm. Regardless of the wind or rain, Zephyr would accompany me to the cafeteria and send me back to the dormitory without fail. Finally, heading to her.I. On Valentine's Day, I accepted his confession and officially became his girlfriend. But after a year of dating, when Aurora returned to China, everything changed. Zephyr began to pick on me frequently, disliking my poor family background and thinking I wasn't gentle enough. He would lose his temper with me easily and humiliate my appearance. He even left me alone on the roadside on my birthday. Before the car accident, Zephyr had already broken up with me. But I didn't agree. "Aren't you being shameless? I've already broken up with you. And you still come to take care of me." Zephyr said this, but looking at my red eyes from crying. He paused and then continued, "Forget it. If you really can't accept it, I cannot break up with you." I didn't really hear what he said clearly. I just stared at Zephyr's face and choked up as I asked, "Zephyr, can you have plastic surgery?" "Zephyr?" Because of my words, Zephyr ignored me again. After I finished my part-time job at the convenience store, I went to the vegetable market and bought half a pig's head. It cost 50 yuan, which was a bit expensive and equivalent to half a day's salary for me. I reluctantly bought it with all the money in my pocket, feeling painful about the money. When Zephyr saw the plate of braised pig's head meat in the evening, he got angry and refused to touch his chopsticks no matter what. I tried to persuade him, "You are what you don't be too picky." Zephyr's face was gloomy, but under my expectant gaze, he reluctantly took a bite. Before I left, I told him that I had something to do and couldn't come the next day, and asked him to find someone else to take care of him. "What do you mean? Don't you love me? You don't want to come after just a few days?" Zephyr's face changed drastically, and he immediately started to blame me. He even refused to let me apply the medicine. I had no choice but to cancel my part-time job for the next day. It took me a long time to soothe Zephyr's anger. A week later, Zephyr was discharged from the hospital, and I helped him pack his things. By the way, someone introduced a very famous doctor to me. "You can go with me to see him tomorrow." Zephyr wasn't very willing and called me troublesome. And under my persistent persuasion, he finally agreed. Early the next morning, I waited at Zephyr's door. I stood at the door for an hour in the hot weather before Zephyr slowly came out. Before leaving, Zephyr answered a phone call. After hanging up, he looked at me and said coldly, "I'm not going." Aurora said she couldn't get a taxi and asked me to pick her up. You can go home by yourself. I was taken aback and blurted out instinctively. But that doctor is only available today. He will go back to the United States tomorrow. If we don't see him, then we don't. Why are you talking so much? How can I not go when her asks me to? Zephyr's tone was very impatient. I fell silent and said in a low voice, can't she take the bus? She hasn't come to see you for so long. But she calls you when she has something. Come on. Why are you so petty? Aurora is delicate and can't take the bus. And don't keep bringing up the car accident. You weren't injured, were you? I've already promised you that I won't break up with you. What else do you want? Zephyr made me sound like a vexatious shrew. He kicked me out of the car, and finally perfunctorily said goodbye to me before driving away. I stood under the big sun again and watched Zephyr's car drive away, stunned for a long time, until there was a noise behind me. When I turned around, I saw a man who looked 8 parts like Zephyr coming out of Zephyr's place. Let me introduce myself. I'm Zephyr's younger brother, Blaze. Blaze looked no more than his early 20s, smiled brightly, and tilted his head at me. I heard that my brother got disfigured in this car accident. Sister-in-law, you'd be better off choosing me than my brother. My face now looks more like Phoenix than my brother's. I was driven back to school by Blaze. After getting out of the car, I sincerely thanked him. Although it was our first meeting, I had a decent impression of him. After all, he saved me 3 yuan for the bus fare. Sister, think about it again. I'm not worse than my brother at all. Blaze blinked his eyes, which were bright and clear, looking like a cute little puppy. What's your educational background? I graduated from the undergraduate program at Cambridge University. I tactfully said, your educational background is too high. It doesn't seem right. Blaze was taken aback. What about Phoenix? Is he from a 985 or 211 university? I pursed my lips, embarrassed lie. He went to a vocational high school and didn't go to university. I studied extremely hard and always ranked among the top 3 in my grade. I was admitted to the best high school in the city. No. One high school. In the high school entrance examination. But Phoenix was different from me. His grades were always at the bottom of the class. And he went to the well-known No. 3 high school full of troublemakers in the city. As soon as he entered the school, he got into a conflict with someone and was publicly announced throughout the school. He was like a reserve member of the young hooligans on the street. After an awkward silence, Blaze said, it's okay. I won't graduate until next year. My educational background is also a high school diploma for now. Just like his. Before Blaze left, he added me on WeChat. His profile picture was a curly little dog. I opened his moments and found that it was full of some life photos, including pictures of him climbing mountains, skiing, and playing basketball. Blaze had a very good photography skill, and he brought out all the advantages of his face in the photos. I couldn't help but give a like and saved a few pictures casually. During the long break after my major class, I called Zephyr again. He had been ignoring me for the past few days, not answering my calls or replying to my WeChat messages. It was hot weather now, and I was worried that if he didn't apply the medicine on time, his wound would get infected. So I called him whenever I had time. This time, he answered the phone quickly. As soon as I opened my mouth, I anxiously asked about his face and how his wound was recovering. Zephyr, who had been impatiently scolding me, paused for a moment and then sent me an address. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day. Dress up nicely and come out for a date. I went back to the dormitory and rummaged through my wardrobe, but I couldn't find a few suitable clothes. Seeing my disappointed look, my roommates volunteered to lend me their clothes and help me with my makeup. Sylvia, you're so beautiful. You're stunning. You're like a fairy descending to the mortal world. For someone who had never dressed up before, the effect of dressing up this time was amazing. My roommate's eyes sparkled with stars, and they rushed to take selfies with me. Beauty, beauty. You will definitely fascinate your boyfriend. If he doesn't have a nosebleed, I'll lose. With the encouragement of my roommates, I took a deep breath and walked out the door. In order not to mess up my carefully styled hair, I gave up the idea of riding a shared bike. After comparing 3 ride-hailing apps, I reluctantly chose Beidou taxi, feeling pained about the money. When I arrived at the appointed place, Zephyr had already been waiting impatiently for a long time. He was tall and had a good figure. He looked very handsome even in a casual suit. But as soon as he turned around, his head was wrapped in bandages, making him look a bit cyberpunk. When I walked closer, Zephyr looked at me for a long time without saying anything. When he came to his senses, his voice was very hoarse. "I've never seen you wear makeup before. You really are." Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by a sweet voice, "Zephyr." The two of us turned around and saw Aurora wearing high heels and dressed in famous brands. As soon as Aurora approached and saw the clothes I was wearing, she started frowning. "Sylvia, I know you're poor, but you can't wear knockoffs. Can you? This dress of yours is a knockoff of the latest design from XX brand. Right? This dress was casually bought online by my roommate. How could a college student tell the difference between high-end custom-made clothes, genuine products, and knockoffs?" At this moment, although my secret was exposed by Aurora, I didn't feel much about it. However, Zephyr's face immediately fell. He gave me a fierce glare and went up to greet Aurora. "Aurora, didn't you say you weren't coming? I thought you were busy." "I was busy at noon. But now I'm free. We're going to have a meal, right? Let's finish the meal quickly. I still want to go shopping." "Okay. What do you want to buy? A necklace or clothes?" "Just use my card." Zephyr spoke softly to Aurora, and the two of them chatted, completely forgetting about my existence. When Aurora impatiently urged Zephyr, he seemed to have just remembered me. Waving his hand casually, Zephyr didn't even look back and said, "Okay. You can go back. I won't see you off." I held back my anger. But in the end, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Zephyr, are you an idiot?" My canvas bag contained a power bank, an umbrella, and it was quite heavy. I picked up the canvas bag and hit Zephyr several times with it, knocking him dazed. "Why weren't you killed in the car accident last time?" I gave him a hard kick in the end, left these words behind, and walked away. Walking on the road, I looked at my outfit. My roommate had lent me her most beautiful dress. She even used the new foundation that she hadn't been willing to use to do my makeup. All of it was wasted because of that idiot Zephyr. And I still had to take the bus back to school. The more I thought about it, the more I regretted it. At least I should have asked Zephyr to reimburse me for the taxi fare. It was so annoying. While waiting for the bus at the bus stop, a black car suddenly drove up and rolled down the window. Blaze, with his yellow hair, was sitting in the driver's seat and smiled brightly as usual. "Sister, you look so beautiful today. Do you want to get in? How about I treat you to a meal?" Blaze is completely different from his elder brother. He watched me clumsily cutting the steak without showing any signs of surprise. He naturally cut the steak in front of him and exchanged it with mine. Unlike Zephyr, he was amused by my appearance and burst into laughter. He even specifically posted a status on Moments, "Amazing. I've seen someone who eats medium rare steak for the first time. Just like what I've heard online." And he deliberately asked me in a teasing tone if I wanted him to get me a pair of chopsticks. At that moment, I wanted to slap the steak onto his face. But when Zephyr smiled, he looked so much like Phoenix. Even the arc of his raised eyebrows was similar. At that time, Phoenix and I sold the plastic bottles we collected and got 70 yuan. It was just enough to buy a steak set meal that cost 16 yuan. Phoenix frowned and cut the steak for a long time. When he got impatient, he called the waiter and asked for 2 pairs of chopsticks. "Is this what steak is like? It's so expensive but they only give such a small amount of meat," Phoenix said. And I nodded in agreement. I ate most of that steak, and Phoenix only finished the complimentary salad. It had always been like this since we were young. Phoenix would always fiercely give me everything he thought was good. So when I saw this smile that was so similar to Phoenix's, I was in a trance. I didn't care about Zephyr's malicious teasing at all. I just looked at him gently and said, "It's up to you." That moment's boast spread throughout the whole school, and all my roommates knew about it. They came running to ask me if Zephyr had bullied me and advised me to break up with him. I propped up my chin and sighed. But I can't bear to part with his face. My roommates, who had been cursing just now, fell silent. Then they flipped through Zephyr's moments again. After a while, they scratched their heads. He is really quite handsome. But little Sylvia, we can't take back someone with such a bad character. Don't be so infatuated. At this moment, looking at Blaze as he lowered his hand and gently cut the steak for me, I couldn't help but be lost in thought. Zephyr's temper was like Phoenix's. Unruly, high-spirited, and ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. But the tenderness and thoughtfulness shown by his younger brother at this moment, I felt that it seemed more like the attitude that the Phoenix I knew had towards me. Blaze noticed my gaze and deliberately or inadvertently showed me his newly dyed hair. I dyed it specially. How is it? Do I look more like him than my brother? Blaze leaned closer to me, and there was an aggression in his eyes that didn't match his cute puppy-like appearance. He said in a low voice, as if coaxing me, "Sister, choose me. I promise I'll love you more than my brother does." I seemed to be bewitched by those eyes and involuntarily allowed him to get closer. Just a second before Blaze's lips touched mine, the ringtone of my phone suddenly rang. The harsh ringtone brought me back to my senses. I evaded Blaze's approach, and a trace of disappointment flashed in Blaze's eyes. The contact name displayed on the screen was Zephyr. When I answered the phone, I heard his irritable voice. "Sylvia, where the hell are you now?" I raised my head and met Zephyr's angry eyes not far away in the restaurant. Well, it has to be said, they really are brothers. They both managed to book the same restaurant when taking girls out for a meal. Zephyr strode over and pushed Blaze aside with one hand. His eyes swept over the two of us, and he urgently questioned, "Why are you two together?" Blaze took a slight step back from being pushed by him, but he just smiled indifferently. "Brother, I just happened to run into Sylvia and had a meal with her. Why are you so anxious?" Zephyr's voice suddenly rose. "A meal? A meal that almost ended up in a kiss?" At this moment, Aurora, who had been left behind, also caught up, seeing the tense atmosphere between the two brothers, Zephyr and Blaze. She gave me a fierce glare. She said to Zephyr in a bad mood, "What are you arguing about? Do you still want to have the meal or not?" Zephyr was taken aback. But he had always been subservient to Aurora, so his attitude softened involuntarily. "Aurora, don't be angry. Be good. Go and order the dishes first. I'll come over as soon as I deal with this." After finally coaxing Aurora away, Zephyr's face darkened again when he looked at me. He sneered. "Sylvia, I'm giving you a chance to explain. What was going on just now? Who allowed you to date another man behind my back?" "Brother," I invited Sylvia. "I just saw a piece of paper on Sylvia's hair. So not wanting to put me in a difficult position." Blaze took a step back first after looking at me and took the initiative to explain to his brother. Zephyr still sneered. "Even so, Sylvia, you shouldn't have agreed. Are you that desperate? As soon as I don't have a meal with you, you immediately start flirting with another man." Zephyr's unfinished words were cut off by my slap. I originally didn't want to hit him, but unfortunately, this bandaged face no longer aroused any pity in me. I slapped him without mercy, and my palm hurt too. I frowned and turned to look at Blaze. "Hey, having fulfilled my obsession, help me beat your brother, and I'll agree to you." Zephyr's injury on his face hadn't healed yet, and now he was so dizzy with pain. But upon hearing my words, he still sneered with disdain. "He's my younger brother. How could he listen to a slut like you?" As he was speaking, a heavy punch landed on his face. Blaze's voice came, with a hint of apology. "I didn't want to do this either. But I can live without a brother. But I can't live without a wife. So I have to offend you, brother." As he said that, another punch landed on Zephyr. After an interval of 2 weeks, Zephyr was sent to the hospital again. I went to visit him once. The doctor said that the wound on his face was inflamed again, and it was almost certain that there would be a scar. When he saw me coming, Zephyr's eyes lit up, but then he raised his head arrogantly. "Even if you kneel down and beg me this time, I will definitely break up with you." Okay. I didn't even listen to what he said next. I threw the only gift he had ever given me at him. A strawberry bear cane that he won by playing a balloon game. I smiled and said, Zephyr. You remember this. Whoever doesn't break up is a dog. Zephyr's face suddenly turned ugly. He clenched the strawberry bear tightly, and his palm even bled. But I had already left. In the second month of my relationship with Blaze, I noticed that he was deliberately imitating every move of Phoenix. He threw away his suit and put on a cheap black tank top. He accompanied me to work part-time, and the dating places were changed from high-end restaurants to bustling snack streets. I finally couldn't hold back and asked, Why do you know about Phoenix? Zephyr didn't know about this, and neither did my roommates. They only knew that I was an inspirational poor student and who had been admitted to Peking University from a remote mountainous area. So how did Blaze know about it? And how could he imitate so perfectly? Blaze was carefully scalding the tableware for me at this moment. When he heard me ask this, his movements froze. It took him a long time to speak in a low voice. As I expected. You don't remember me. Zephyr only became wealthy in recent years. My brother was always taken care of by our parents since we were young. While I stayed in our hometown to study, I also studied at Secheng one high school for 3 years. At that time, you just couldn't see me. You only had eyes for Phoenix. Phoenix was very famous in high school. People said that he was good-looking and excellent at fighting. They said that he was unruly and had a conflict with others as soon as he entered the school, and it was announced throughout the school. The girl sitting behind me said that when she passed by a net bar after school, she saw a group of young people from the streets gathering and smoking. She saw Phoenix's face among them. I saw that they were holding sticks in their hands. It was really scary. So when Phoenix came to pick me up after school in the afternoon, I looked at his back as he carried my school bag with one hand in front of me and pursed my lips. Stop fighting. Phoenix turned his head to look at me, and I noticed the faint bruise on his forehead. It was carefully covered up, and it wasn't noticeable unless you looked closely. Phoenix came over, put his arm around my shoulder, and led me forward. He smiled. Little kid, you want to meddle in my business? I didn't say anything. I pushed his arm away forcefully and turned my head. This was how I showed my anger. Phoenix was slightly taken aback. I continued to speak, my voice lowering. What's so good about fighting? You'll get injured after fighting back and forth. Is it for the money? Or do you think it's cool and handsome? Do you want to be like Gao Qianqiang and be a boss with a group of lackeys? Fight for your whole life. Phoenix covered my mouth, looking a bit annoyed and embarrassed. Okay, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. Okay, I won't go fighting anymore. Otherwise, I'll beat you up. We fell silent and just walked forward. I lowered my head and after a long time, I said, for people like us, studying is the only way out. The premise of being willful and reckless is having a family and family members to rely on. We are destined not to have that. What kind of people were Phoenix and I? We both knew it clearly. Phoenix looked ahead without blinking. The light and shadow fell on his hair through the leaves. He said, Since you know all this, you also know that you should study hard and lead this place. After having dinner in the evening, I carefully applied medicine to the wound on his face. Phoenix closed his eyes, and the sharpness of his eyebrows and eyes dissipated a bit, making him look a bit docile in the setting sun. I heard that you didn't even score 400 points in this monthly exam. I criticized him without mercy. Phoenix, are you stupid? I scored higher than you even though I missed one exam. Phoenix seemed not to have heard me. He hissed in pain and asked me to apply the medicine more gently. I ignored him. After applying the ointment and closing the container, I sat beside him and watched the setting sun gradually go down. The college entrance examination will be in a year. I wonder what the future will be like. I turned to look at Phoenix. His pupils were amber, clear and translucent, and at the same time, they looked indifferent and calm. I interlaced my fingers with his and placed our hands on his knee. I got the first place in the class again this time. The teacher said that my grades are stable, and it's possible for me to get into the best university in China. The setting sun was especially gorgeous today. There were passers-by around who picked up their phones to take photos one after another. Such a beautiful scenery made people feel relaxed involuntarily. I said, Actually, it doesn't matter. I'll go to Peking University. And you'll go to Beta Jade Bird. It doesn't sound much different. Phoenix was amused by my words, and squeezed my fingers hard. You're getting better and better at being sarcastic. But Phoenix knew that I didn't mean it that way. After a while, he gently rubbed the finger that he had pinched red. Phoenix looked at the gradually disappearing setting sun. I didn't know if it was because the air was too quiet, or for some other reason. Phoenix's voice sounded particularly gentle. I see. We'll go to Beijing together. In my senior year of high school, I was pestered by Ni Feng, a well-known rich second-generation student in our school. Outside the school gate, Phoenix grabbed Ni Feng's arm tightly and warned, "Stay away from her." Ni Feng was a bit afraid of him but still unconvinced, saying, "Who are you? You really like to meddle in other people's business. No matter what, I'm better than a hooligan like you. Sylvia is going to get into a good school. Why should she hang out with someone like you?" Phoenix's expression turned cold, and he looked terrifyingly fierce as he said, "I said, stay away from her." I was afraid that Phoenix and Ni Feng would fight. Some people were already looking in our direction. I turned to Ni Feng and said, "Stop pestering me, or I'll tell your family all about your affairs." Ni Feng shivered. What he feared most was his stern father. I pulled Phoenix and walked out quickly. Sure enough, Ni Feng didn't chase after us. Don't listen to his nonsense. I've never thought you were bad. Phoenix was silent all the way. I guessed that he might have been affected by Ni Feng's words. I took the initiative to grab his wrist and smiled at him. Don't listen to his nonsense. Don't be angry. Phoenix. Phoenix? Phoenix? I called him in different ways for a long time and made faces in front of Phoenix. Phoenix finally smiled and took out the bag that he had been clutching tightly behind his back and opened it. I let out a cry of surprise. "They are the flour cakes from West Street." Phoenix ruffled my hair. "Yeah. Eat them." He took out some money from his pocket. 1 yuan, 5 yuan, and 10 yuan bills. A handful of scattered small change was stuffed into my pocket. Then he took out several new tutoring books and stuffed them into my school bag. "Eat well, or I'll beat you up." After Phoenix stopped fighting, he helped people repair mobile phones, watches, and toys. He was naturally sensitive to electronic products. He could get 120 points in math, but he couldn't even get 30 points in English. His slender fingers had not only old scars that could never be erased but also new fine scratches. The pocket money that was ordinary in others' eyes was hard-earned for him, with every bill being precious. In the most sensitive and self-respecting adolescence, haggling over 3 or 5 yuan in front of classmates made him unconsciously lower his head. I didn't want to accept it, but I knew that Phoenix had 1,000 ways to make me take it, so I said, "Okay." Since Phoenix didn't have good grades, I was determined to get into the best university. I would graduate with the best grades and find the best job. I unfolded each bill carefully and flattened them, then put them into a worn-out piggy bank. We would definitely go to Beijing together. It didn't make a difference whether the money was kept with me or with him. Phoenix and I had depended on each other in the welfare institutes since we were children. Phoenix protected me from the welfare institute through junior high school and then through high school. Hidden love grew in the soil of our young days of relying on each other. I didn't know who took the initiative first. As time flew by, our two thin hands interlocked their fingers. I made a New Year's wish under the gorgeous fireworks. I wish everyone in the Welfare Institute safety and peace. And I wish all the brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunts who made donations happiness and joy. I secretly glanced at Phoenix and greedily made a second wish. I wish Phoenix all the best in the future and that he can soar high up into the sky. So I often felt that I was too greedy and had angered the heavens. But the heavens had mistaken the person and brought disaster upon Phoenix. Phoenix got into a fight with someone and ended up in the hospital. The person he fought with was Ni Feng. Ni Feng broke a rib and remained unconscious for 2 days without waking up. Ni Feng's father was furious and used his connections to try to send Phoenix to a juvenile detention center. When I rushed to the hospital, Phoenix was lowering his head and watching the doctor change the dressing, not knowing what he was thinking. A thick layer of plaster was on his right hand, making it look clumsy and ridiculous. I rushed in front of the doctor, and my hands holding the doctor's sleeves were shaking. Can his hand recover? He's going to take the college entrance examination. The doctor looked at me with pity and shook his head. It will take at least half a year for the injury to recover. Moreover, the nerves in his right hand are damaged. Even if it gets better, he can only use it for daily purposes and won't be able to hold a pen. My nose twitched, and I almost burst into tears. When Phoenix saw that I had come, he didn't react much and still kept his head down. I walked in front of Phoenix, and my tears dripped onto the ground. Instead, Phoenix spoke first. I failed to keep my promise and got into a fight again. I've never been well behaved, and I like to lie. I've never been able to do the things I promised. Phoenix finally raised his head, and I noticed his eyes full of red blood vessels. His amber eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of dust. Phoenix opened his mouth and said calmly, "Sylvia, let's break up. We're not suitable for each other." Phoenix was sent to a juvenile detention center and was to be locked up for half a year. I tried several times to visit him in the capacity of a family member. Each time, Phoenix refused. The last time I was refused, I stood up and shouted as loudly as I could towards the inside, "Phoenix, I'll wait for you to get out." I didn't know if Phoenix could hear me. The staff quickly came over and pulled me out. My voice lowered, and I murmured to myself, "Forever." When I was distracted in class again, the head teacher called me to the office. He held my report card and sighed, "Sylvia, you dropped out of the top 50 in the grade in the last monthly exam. Are there any difficulties in your studies? You can tell the teacher." I lowered my head and didn't say a word. The head teacher patted me on the shoulder. "You are the most likely person in our class to get into Peking University. The teacher hopes that you can adjust as soon as possible. The college entrance examination is too important. It can even determine a person's life." "I understand, teacher. I will adjust myself." From that day on, I studied even harder. I got rid of all other thoughts. I focused all my attention on my studies, and my grades quickly caught up. But I knew that those sour and panicky emotions hadn't disappeared. They were just deeply suppressed in my heart. I didn't share them with anyone, and I didn't need anyone's comfort. I was waiting for Phoenix to get out, waiting to go to Beijing together, and waiting to embrace our world. On the day Phoenix was released, I took a day off. I waited early at the gate of the juvenile detention center. From morning until nightfall, I couldn't help but ask the staff. The staff thought for a while. "Oh, that Phoenix. He performed well inside and was released 2 weeks early." I almost couldn't stand still for a moment. Phoenix had been released early. But he didn't go back to the Welfare Institute. Where did he go? Why? Didn't he come to find me? Thinking of the last words Phoenix said to me. "Sylvia, let's break up. We're not suitable." The staff saw me suddenly squat down and let out a cry as they came to pull me up. I looked up, and only then did they realize that I was already in tears. I went to Phoenix's school to inquire. Phoenix had dropped out of school. I also contacted several of his former friends. After going through several people and persistently pestering them, I finally got an address. As it got dark, the car repair shop turned on the orange-yellow lights. There weren't many people there. The boss had a crew cut and was squatting on the ground, shouting towards the inside. "Phoenix, bring the wrench over here." Someone inside responded and came out. His hair was a bit long and covered his eyebrows and eyes. He walked over in silence and worked with the boss to remove the damaged tire with effort. I noticed his right hand, which was hidden in his sleeve. When he stretched it out and exerted force, it would tremble involuntarily. But Phoenix's expression remained unchanged, and he shifted most of the weight to his left hand. I crouched behind a big tree and secretly watched for a long time. When Phoenix greeted the boss and got off work, he carried a worn-out bag and walked out. I pursed my lips and followed him. After following Phoenix through several streets, Phoenix suddenly stopped, turned his back to me, and said coldly, "Come out." I paused for a moment and then walked out slowly. When Phoenix turned around and saw that it was me, his tightly clenched fist relaxed. The two of us stood facing each other, and the air was terrifyingly silent. "You're out." I broke the silence first, pinching the hem of my clothes and asking softly, Why didn't you come to find me? Phoenix in the moonlight was like a silent statue. He didn't speak until after a while. But he didn't answer my question. I heard that you found your parents. They specially came to find you from Beijing. Is that true? Yes. A week ago. The aunt in the Welfare Institute told me that my parents had been found. I didn't believe it at first. But when I met that couple, seeing the well-maintained middle-aged woman with a face very similar to mine, my heart skipped a beat uncontrollably, and tears welled up in my eyes. The Sylvia family was wealthy. Since I got lost, my parents had been looking for me. After they found me this time, my mother hugged me and almost fainted from crying. My father was stern, but there were also tears in his eyes. Looking at my old clothes, his voice was choked with sobs as he patted my shoulder and kept saying, "Good. Good. It's good that we found you." They were going to take me back to Beijing soon. But I said to wait a little longer. Just as they were going to prepare the materials for the household registration transfer, my father went back to Beijing first. My mother stayed behind to accompany me and would come to pick us up later. Are they good to you? They're very nice. Phoenix fell silent again. I took a few steps forward. I've told them that I want to take you with me. There are still 3 months until the college entrance examination. If you can't take it this year, there's still next year. It's not too late to repeat a year, and then take the college entrance examination. Phoenix shook his head and lowered his eyes. No need. I can't hold a pen. He looked at me, and his voice was overly calm. Sylvia, you shouldn't care about me anymore. Go back to your original life. You were supposed to be born in Beijing and be the carefree young lady of the Sylvia family for a lifetime. Why take me with you? What identity and what reason would I have? We broke up a long time ago. Sylvia, when will you realize that? I felt as if my heart was being grabbed by a big hand. A numb dull pain quickly spread. My eyes turned red. And I questioned him, but Phoenix, are you going to stay here for a lifetime and repair cars for a lifetime? The night wind blew the ends of my hair. Phoenix looked down at the engine oil and had stained the hem of his clothes. It was a black patch. Pungent and dirty. Even after washing it with laundry powder, there would still be gray marks left. What's so bad about repairing cars? It provides food and accommodation. And there's a salary. It's enough to support myself. The aunties in the park were playing music and doing square dancing. The music played in waves. I said softly, if you can't use your right hand, then learn to write with your left hand. If you're not good at English, I'll accompany you to memorize words every day. Phoenix stood there motionless, and tears fell one by one from my eyes. I choked up and said, everything can be solved. Phoenix, will you meet me in Beijing? I saw Phoenix's fingers tremble. He raised his head. I couldn't see his expression clearly under the shade of the tree. After a long while, his voice came, but, Sylvia. Phoenix smiled, and his tone was calm. I think it's easier to learn to repair cars with my left hand than to learn to write with it. Phoenix is a liar. So I don't believe every word he says. So I went to look for Phoenix every day after school. But Phoenix didn't want to see me and deliberately avoided me. I simply sat under the big tree and lay on the bench to do my test papers. I waited until the sun set and the sky was completely dark. Finally, someone stood in front of me. Phoenix lowered his eyes and his voice was a bit cold. Why are you still on the street and not going home at night? I raised my head, smiled at Phoenix, and said in a low voice, I'm waiting for you to walk me home. Phoenix didn't say a word. He picked up my school bag and walked forward. I quickly caught up with him. XX Hotel. It's the most expensive and luxurious hotel in our city. Phoenix didn't stop walking, and his voice came from ahead. After I send you back, don't come to find me again. There are all kinds of people here in society. This isn't a place for you. I pursed my lips and reached out to touch Phoenix's wrist. He stiffened for a moment and then dodged it the next second. I said, you shouldn't be here either. This is where I work. Why shouldn't I be here? But you're only 18 years old. I shouted at Phoenix. Phoenix stopped in his tracks. We had already reached the entrance of the hotel. My voice was very soft. I'm going back to Beijing in 3 days. Phoenix, would you like to come with me? Phoenix gave me the school bag and walked back. No. He walked a few steps. People's hearts change easily. What we say when we're young can't be taken seriously. Sylvia. You shouldn't accommodate me. Go back to Beijing. Do well in the college entrance examination. And live a good life. Phoenix. I suddenly called out to stop him. Phoenix paused for a moment but didn't turn back. I closed my eyes for a moment, opened them again, and said word by word, but you got your hand injured because of me. The temper of young people is the most unpredictable. When their pursuit fails, they become angry and frustrated. He threatened to make me cry and beg to be his girlfriend. He took the lead in isolating me at school and making sarcastic remarks. And he paid some gangsters outside the school to block me. I hid the torn notes at the bottom of my school bag. I lied to Phoenix that there was evening self-study at school, went home alone, and pretended not to hear the gangsters' flirtatious remarks on the roadside. But Phoenix seemed to have noticed something. I could never hide anything from him. But since I didn't say anything, he also played along with me and pretended not to know. Until one time I was blocked by the gangsters. They said filthy words and even tried to grab my wrist. I picked up a stone on the roadside and hit the head of the leading gangster hard, making him bleed profusely. I woke up with a start at night. Afraid of waking others up, I walked out of the room and hid in the corner crying alone. After crying, I wiped away my tears and secretly cheered myself up in my heart. It doesn't matter. The college entrance examination is coming soon. And I won't see these people anymore. But I didn't expect that Phoenix went to find Mi Feng the next day. Mi Feng called Phoenix a poor and inferior person. He called me a hypocritical and dissolute person who seduced him first. Phoenix rushed at him with red eyes. No one expected that a high school student would carry a knife with him. Mi Feng was enraged by the beating and stabbed Phoenix's right hand with a knife. Phoenix's right hand is thin and long. There are dark red scars remaining on his index finger and middle finger. There are scratches on his palm left accidentally by a small knife for repairing equipment. There is a callus on his thumb, which clearly shows that he has suffered hardships. This hand doesn't look like a young man's hand. It looks like an adult's hand. Now, because of the nerve injury, it always shakes involuntarily. He can no longer hold a pen, nor can he do delicate work. The high-spirited young man injured his hand, was sent to a juvenile detention center. And the last words he said to me were to break up. I choked up and asked Phoenix, "Do you regret fighting with Mi Feng because of me?" No one answered. The figure in front of me walked farther and farther away. My vision also became more and more blurred. Mother Lin was worried about me. She came to wait for me at the entrance of the hotel. As soon as she saw me like this, she ran over anxiously. "What's wrong with you?" I threw myself into her arms at once. My mother's warm embrace seemed to have endless tolerance. I burst into tears. My heart ached as if it had been hit by a bullet. And my whole body couldn't help shaking. "Mom. He doesn't want me anymore. I'm a sinner." Mother Lin didn't know what I was talking about. She just felt so distressed that she didn't know what to do. As a mother, she was also drawn into the emotions, her voice choking, and she kept saying that it was okay to go home. This time I didn't refuse and went back to Beijing with Father Lin and Mother Lin. "That's it. There's nothing more to say about me and Phoenix," I said calmly, looking at Blaze's profile in the sunlight. Blaze said, "Since you've returned to the Sylvia family, why do you look?" I knew what he was going to say next. He wanted to ask why my life still seemed so straightened. But at this moment, Zephyr, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, suddenly appeared in front of me. The once exquisitely dressed young master's Zephyr now looked a bit downcast. He looked at me and still tried to put on an air of superiority, saying in a tone of bestowing favor, "If you know how to apologize to me, you can still be my girlfriend." But at this time, my mood was not calm because of the memories of the past. I didn't even raise my head and was too lazy to pay attention to him. Zephyr was taken aback. Just when I thought he was going to lose his temper as he used to, I heard his voice suddenly soften. And it was a rare moment when he lowered his stance. "Okay. Stop being angry. Aurora has already left. Is it necessary to be angry for so long?" I realized that it was because Aurora had gone abroad again. And that's why he came to me to get back together. I sneered. I didn't want to pretend anymore and was straightforward. I don't want to look at your disfigured face. Why do you think that I have to take back the trash that or doesn't want? Zephyr's face turned pale, and he stepped forward urgently. But you were so worried about me in the hospital that time? Since you don't care about the car accident, why do you care about what happened on QAXI Festival? I didn't want to entangle with Zephyr anymore. That's because I thought your face could still be saved. My gaze swept over Zephyr's stiff body, and I commented, the only useful thing about you is your face. The only value of it is that it looks a bit like his. Unfortunately, headings have filled my. I don't want it anymore. I had left for a long time, and I could still hear Zephyr's roaring. He swept all the cups on the table to the ground and roared angrily and sadly. Sylvia, you fucking treat me as a substitute? I walked with Blaze by the lake for a long time. I sighed, okay. There's no need to act anymore. I had long known Blaze's purpose. As the second young master of the Zephyr family, his struggle with his elder brother was almost out in the open. It sounds nice to say that he pursued me because he was brave enough to pursue love, and he didn't even mind that I was his sister-in-law. But to put it bluntly, heading so fieldly, it was a provocation. He wanted to step on Zephyr's face to the ground by using me. Sylvia, I'm not. Zephyr's pupils trembled, and he was flustered and wanted to explain. But I just shook my head. When Zephyr was in the hospital and Blaze came to visit him with a group of people, I had already heard their conversation. They laughed at my infatuation, saying that I was a top-level licking dog and a clown, and that I had bad taste. Blaze leaned against the wall smoking a cigarette. With a smile on his lips, you guys say, if I hook up with my brother's licking dog and then humiliate her in front of my brother, will my brother go crazy with anger? The group of people looked at each other in dismay. Someone said hesitantly, but her feelings for your brother. Blaze extinguished the cigarette, but in a corner. I don't believe that she has deep feelings for my brother. Blaze laughed wildly. I know her secret. Blaze's lips trembled. I was just talking nonsense at that time. I didn't lie to you. I really studied at Suching No. One middle school for 3 years. He reached out to pull me, but I gently dodged. Blaze's face turned pale all of a sudden, and he suddenly laughed. All that talk about using you and acting is just an excuse. You still can't forget Phoenix, right? Living people can never compare to the dead, can they? The day after I returned to the Sylvia family, Lin Xiao, who is my own younger brother, started crying and making a fuss, clamoring to send me away, and even went on a hunger strike. The 15-year-old boy. I don't know who told him that I came back to compete with him for the property of the Sylvia family. The first time he saw me, he regarded me as an enemy, calling me cheap, scheming, and vicious. Father Lin and Mother Lin looked embarrassed, but their hearts had long been biased towards their only son who had been with them since childhood. Father Lin gave me 200 yuan as living expenses before I reached the age of majority. With a bit of guilt, he sent me back to Sucheng again. It was only then that I realized that I didn't have a home. On the afternoon of the day I returned to Sucheng, I was blocked in a corner by a group of gangsters. They tore up my clothes, rummaged through my bag, and forced me to hand over the 200 yuan. I looked at them quietly and suddenly understood why Lin Xiao so easily let Father Lin give me the money. The gangsters rummaged through my school bag but couldn't find the bank card. Finally, had fulfilled my say. They walked towards me with a ferocious smile. I don't remember much about that day. I only remember countless blinding camera flashes. They showed the photos and threatened me to hand over the bank card within 3 days. Otherwise, they would spread the photos throughout the whole Sucheng. But this was never my fault. I don't think it was my fault. I calmly kept the evidence and stumbled to the police station to report the case. All 5 gangsters, big and small, were sent to prison. Before they were caught, they looked at me with vicious eyes and shouted that they would kill me when they got out. I recorded a video in turn as evidence, which extended their prison terms by several years. When Phoenix found me, my photos were already spreading all over the internet. Countless people were asking for resources and photos in the comments. Phoenix hugged me tightly, and his arms were shaking. Those beasts should be torn to pieces. Phoenix looked at me, His eyes red. His always straight back bent. And he choked up, "I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have let you go." In contrast, I seemed calm and even comforted Phoenix in return. "It's their fault. There's no need for me to reflect on it with you." I wrote down all the bloggers who spread the photos on the internet. I sued them one by one in court in order. In court, those people were still arguing that they were just curious. Under my cold gaze, they gradually fell silent one by one. According to the scope of dissemination, everyone received different degrees of punishment. Phoenix became more and more silent and started going out early and coming back late more and more often. I transferred back to Sucheng one middle school to study. Occasionally, heading to Y. Some boys in the school cast lewd glances at me, but the girls scolded them back one by one. The girls gave me all kinds of snacks and gifts every day. They talked to me in a gentle and soft voice, carefully protecting my self-esteem. I didn't refuse anyone's kindness. I smiled, studied, and did the exercises. I seemed to be no different from usual. After the college entrance examination, when Phoenix and I were working part-time in a barbecue restaurant, and news came that the Sylvia family's house was on fire, and the villa of the Sylvia family was burned to the ground. Surprisingly, Father Lin and Mother Lin were not hurt. Only Lin Xiao had his 2 legs paralyzed by the falling wall. The Sylvia family was heartbroken. Seeing that Lin Xiao couldn't be cured, they actually wanted to take me back home again. I refused. The 200 yuan brought me disaster and also bought out my family affection. At dinner, when Phoenix got up to wash the dishes, I said, "That fire?" I paused for a moment and then continued, "Do you know what caused it?" Phoenix didn't stop his movements and his voice was calm. Oh, I don't know. Haven't the police investigated it yet?" "Why are you asking this?" I said. "It's nothing. The cause of the fire didn't matter anymore." I also didn't want to know where Phoenix had gone during the 3 days he disappeared. Those who did something wrong should pay the price. After I was admitted to Peking University, a municipal government and various enterprises gave me a total reward of 300 Azura yuan. Adding that 200 yuan, I couldn't help but feel happy and ran to find Phoenix. "We have enough money now. There's 500 yuan in total. It's enough for me to finish my university studies, and also enough for us to settle down in Beijing." Phoenix didn't stop his work of repairing the car. He also rarely showed a smile and told me to keep the money properly deposited for a fixed term. "After you graduate, you can start a business or buy a house. Whatever you want." Phoenix also gave me all the money he had saved since he started repairing cars. He had gathered together 10 yuan from 5 yuan and 10 yuan bills. At that time, I was still immersed in the anticipation of a new life with Phoenix. I completely failed to see the tenderness in Phoenix's eyes and the faint trace of attachment that was hard to detect. Phoenix asked me to go to the university to register and attend classes first. He still needed a month to deal with the matters of the car repair shop. A month later, I couldn't get through to Phoenix's phone anymore. When I rushed back to Sioux City without stopping, I heard the news that Nifeng had died. Nifeng was among the gangsters in that incident. But he had power and influence and bribed the gangsters. The gangsters insisted that he hadn't participated. With the help of Nifeng's father's connections and operations, he actually managed to escape punishment. Later, those few gangsters, either because of mental illness or on medical parole outside prison, they all came out one after another within a few months. After those gangsters came out, they had looked for me several times. They threatened to kill me and demanded that 200 yuan from me. I told them that I would have more money after being admitted to Peking University and slowly managed to stabilize them. I thought about giving all the money to them in exchange for a peaceful life. I also thought about recording a video and then suing them in court, spending my whole life seeking justice. I even thought about giving up my studies, running to a small county in the south to live a humble life, which was better than being threatened like this. I always thought I had hidden it well, and that Phoenix didn't know about these things. But I never thought that when I was awake and by nightmares at night and couldn't fall asleep, and when I was sitting there in a daze, Phoenix who was just separated from me by a wall, also stared blankly at the ceiling until dawn with a blank expression. After Ni Feng, it was those 5 gangsters. They all died a miserable death, with their faces distorted and their bodies thrown into the toilet. The day Phoenix was arrested, I was having a class at the university. The teacher of that specialized course was very humorous, and the students were laughing heartily. Only my heart was pounding for no reason, and I couldn't force a smile. Watching the birds fly by outside the window, when I came to my senses, I was already in tears. The last time I saw Phoenix was his body. It was covered with a thin layer of white cloth and lay quietly on the ground. The staff member looked at my face worriedly and wanted to support me. I waved my hand and slowly walked step by step to the front of that white cloth. I thought I was strong, and I thought I was calm. When I was bullied by so many gangsters and they took photos of me, I didn't cry. I even fiercely pounced on them and bit their necks until they were bloody and blurry. But now, I tried to reach out and touch that white cloth. After several attempts, I couldn't even lift my hand. When the staff member suddenly grabbed my shoulder, I realized that my whole body was shaking. Why? Why? I murmured to myself. Phoenix, why did you decide my matters for me? And why did you decide your own life without discussing it with me? I couldn't hold back anymore. And tears fell down. Drop by drop, they wet that white cloth. It was as if thousands of sharp swords had stabbed into my heart. After the coldness, there was extreme pain. I choked up and said, Phoenix, I regret it. Once, Phoenix held me and said he regretted it. Regretted letting Mother Lin take me back to Beijing. Now I regret it. Regret that I came back to Sioux City again. I brought the disaster back to Sioux City and brought it to Phoenix. Phoenix was a liar. He had promised to go to Beijing with me but could never fulfill it. And I was a sinner who repaid kindness with ingratitude. It was me who killed Phoenix. After graduating from university, I entered a very good Class A tertiary hospital. Half a year later, when I saw Zephyr again, he had already taken over the Zephyr enterprise. The injuries on Zephyr's face had all healed, but his smile still looked a bit stiff. He looked at me and his tone was a bit cautious. I had plastic surgery. Does it look okay? You can think of me as him, as long as you're still willing to accept me. I was stunned for a moment, then shook my head and sighed with a bitter smile. Why bother? It was originally just mutual utilization. He used my status as the campus belle to satisfy his vanity, and to provoke his first love, Aurora. And I regarded him as a substitute to miss someone I could never see again. What's the point of saying all these things now? In the second year of my work, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. When the pandemic was at its worst, I applied to support Wuhan. I persuaded the head nurse who was competing with me for the quota. You still have a family, and your child is only 3 years old. It's better to let me go. I have nothing to worry about. So I'm the most suitable. After the pandemic, I went to help with the construction in remote and poor areas such as Qinghai, Tibet, and Henan. There, I saw many children who were just like me and Phoenix in the past. I acted as a go-between and tried my best to ensure that all the children received sponsorships and could complete their studies. Various enterprises responded actively, and Zephyr made the most sponsorships and the largest amount of charitable donations. After that, I started to study the psychological problems of teenagers. I published a series of books about the psychological harm to teenagers caused by the original family, campus violence, etc. Together with relevant practitioners, I improved the legal regulations and punishments regarding juvenile delinquency. On the weekend, I sat in front of Phoenix's tombstone again, holding a bouquet of flowers. I've done a lot of things, but I still feel that I haven't done enough. I chattered on as usual, telling Phoenix about my work and life. I told him that a girl I sponsored was admitted to Tingshui University, and she specially called me to share the good news. The shard flashed fiercely from between the eyebrows to the corner of the mouth, almost disfiguring him. Just like you. At a young age, he can detect problems that the old master can't find out. I smiled and my voice was very gentle. I've thought about it. If he has the talent, I'll find someone to teach him a craft. When it gradually started to drizzle in the distance, I fell silent. After the air was quiet for a long time, I said in a low voice, "What should I do? I still miss you so much." When the rain gradually got heavier and the raindrops fell on my face, I stood up, turned around and walked a few steps, then turned back and showed a smile. "I've been performing well recently. Can I get your praise?" At night, lying in bed, I hummed a song and slowly fell asleep. I knew that I would see Phoenix soon. I would show him the new sweater I knitted and the new hat I embroidered. He would pat my head and gently praise me for being great. So tonight will be a good dream. Good night.